Well, when I wear the vest, my southern comes out, so I apologize. I call this sermon The Vile and the Victorious. It's from Revelation 21, 5 through 8. The Vile and the Victorious. Revelation 21, 5 through 8. When you find your place, please stand for the reading of God's holy word, the most important part of the service. If you're watching from home, put your heart into a position of reverence for the reading of God's holy word. He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. He said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all of this. And I will be their God, and they will be my children. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, they will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death. Father in heaven, we pray to you today in the words of Charles Wesley. Ye servants of God, your master proclaim and publish abroad his wonderful name. The name all victorious of Jesus extol. His kingdom is glorious and rules over all. God ruleth on high, almighty to save, and still he is nigh. His presence we have. The great congregation his triumph shall sing, ascribing salvation to Jesus our King. Amen. One of my favorite films, one of my favorite movies of all time is an old one. It's Citizen Kane. From the moment the word rosebud is whispered into our ears, we are caught in a narrative web. What is rosebud? Why does the sound of such a lovely combination of letters fill the listener with such dread when we hear it? Rosebud. The word itself, rosebud, speaks of beauty and of new beginnings, and yet it is whispered into a vacuum of desolate winter and death. Who said them? And why did it feel like someone walked over my grave when they did? Charles Foster Kane is a strange mix of naivety and idealism. He begins his life as an idealistic and ambitious young man, if not a little naive. He positions himself as the champion of the common man. Sound familiar? And as he does so, his empire and his ego grow slowly but surely. The film, its noir style, catches all the nuances of good and evil in the celluloid black and white. It catches all the confusion in the tangle of shadows that it weaves, the shadows which slowly settle in upon the mise-en-scene. We begin to feel choked out by the density of the fog of images that are presented to us. One pivotal moment, one pivotal scene that catches the time or the moment when ego takes over has always impressed me with its subtleness in this movie. All shadows are subtle. All shadows are subtle. It is only the light that shocks and disorients us when it hits us. Shadows just slowly creep in, unnoticed. Charles is reluctantly giving up control of his newspaper empire in part of the film. I hope I'm not blowing it for anyone. He's giving up control of his newspaper empire, and as he bends down to sign the agreement, he is enveloped in shadow. And that is when you realize that something about this scene is not right. This Charles, this Citizen Kane, who is signing the contract, is not the same Charles who lifted the pen. Something dark has happened within Charles Foster Kane. Something only he, God, and maybe the astute moviegoer might have noticed. His hubris and defiance have come back to demand their toll. come back to demand their terms. Right before signing away his kingdom, Mr. Cain, foolhardily throwing his money onto the idol of his own ego, says to the person talking to him, "You're right. I did lose $1 million last year. I expect to lose $1 million this year. I expect to lose $1 million next year. You know, Mr. Thatcher, at the rate of $1 million a year, I'll have to close this place down in 60 years. Just as the world shakes its fist at God and says, I'll live by my own rules no matter the cost, so too does Citizen Cain cut his nose off to spite his face. But as we judge poor Citizen Cain, as we judge poor Charles, let us remind ourselves of our own culpability before the King of righteousness. None are righteous, he said to me, no, not one. Today, I am going to paint a very, very bleak picture of our dear fallen citizen. But I want you to remember this. He is a complex figure, and so are you. So let us not judge our fellow citizen too harshly, for all of us have questioned our own responsibility towards our brother, and we have all asked, am I his keeper? We reveal truth. We are all Citizen Cain. How has Cain fallen? Well, let me count the ways. The good book says this: the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars. They will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is death number 2. Was Charles a coward? We have to go through the list. Was Charles a coward? Because Charles, in many ways, resembles people we know intimately. On the surface, it might not seem that he was a coward. He bulldozed his way through life with confidence, building an empire that few could rival. But look a little closer, and you'll see a man who is paralyzed by fear. Fear of intimacy, fear of failure, and most of all, fear of being vulnerable. This cowardice was the driving force behind his need for control and manipulation. Instead of risking love and connection, he chooses to shield himself with power and wealth, convincing himself that he didn't need other people. But his fear left him in shadow. His fear left him isolated, driving away the very people who mattered the most to him. For those who haven't seen the film, I'll try to avoid major spoilers, though it's hard. Let's just say that Cain's downfall wasn't from external forces, but from his own refusal to face his inner fears. He was a coward. In the end, one simple word, which I won't spell out here, becomes a symbol of everything he was too afraid to embrace. His cowardice made him powerful, but it also left him utterly alone, proving that without the courage to love, no amount of power or wealth can ever fill that void. Was he unbelieving? That's on the list. Well, while the film is not overtly about the biblical faith, as with everything, faith still plays a part, plays a role, or rather, fails to play a role. In Charles's life, faith isn't there. His entire existence demonstrates a lack of belief. If the thought or action required trust in something beyond himself, Cain fell short. Faith, in any form at all, failed Citizen Cain. He was a man who could not trust in anything higher than his own ambitions or his own desires. To place his trust in any higher purpose, or even in the moral responsibility that should accompany mature power, was a step that man refused to take. Instead, his life became a testament to the destructive consequences of self-reliance, where belief in anything other than his own will was dismissed as weakness. Without faith, either in people or in principles, he built an empire on shifting sand, leaving him spiritually bankrupt. I was going to ask you if he was vile, but we know that he was, for we are very familiar with Citizen Kane. The word vile stings a little, doesn't it? Let's see what it includes. For Charles, it includes his utter disregard for others in his life. He manipulates people, especially those that are closest to him. His entire life reveals a self-centeredness that harms those around him. The Bible lists these things. The Bible lists these things as vile. We'll go through them again. Cowardice, unbelief, immorality, murder, magic arts, idolatry, and lies. Each of these, in their own way, can be seen in the unraveling of Cain's life. Each of them. His manipulation of others is a form of dishonesty and idolatry, placing his own desires and ego above everything else. His relationships suffer from this moral bankruptcy. All of his relationships suffer from it, leaving a trail of emotional destruction in his wake. And while he may not commit murder in the literal sense, he certainly kills the spirit and hopes of those around him. His life is an illustration of what happens when the vile takes root, when selfishness becomes the defining trait in a life. Is he a murderer? Well, according to Christ, we all are. Welcome to the satanic simulation, comrade. Yes, he is a murderer. He kills spirit, he kills relationship, and he kills potential. Where he walks, death follows behind, and a trail leads east of Eden every time. As we travel through the celluloid landscape, we witness a veritable mausoleum of dead wives, dead friends, and dead dreams. His relentless pursuit of control, of godhood, destroys the lives around him. If not physically, then in every way that matters. What is in a man's heart, so is he. Is he a murderer? Show me a citizen who isn't. As Red says in the Shawshank Redemption, we're all innocent in here. Don't you know that? But here's the truth. None of us are. Have you not quite figured out the satanic simulation yet? Have you been with me all this time and you're not hearing? We're here because we broke the 10 that matter in word, thought, and deed. Praise be to our high priest, and praise be to our court-appointed defendant. All who will be covered by the blood will be cleansed. Now, I know y'all are wondering, was he sexually immoral? Well, guess what, citizen. We have those in here too. It's not looking too good here on the inside, is it? But some do get rehabilitated. They have to die first, though. That's the catch. That's the kicker. They say all this stuff about being covered by the blood and free grace and all of that, but what they don't tell you is that it drowns your sorry rear end, and it drowns your ego, and it washes you clean straight through and through, even parts you don't want cleaning. But it's as real as a death can get. It's as dead can be. It truly is a rugged cross. The old man goes down, kicking and screaming, but he does go down. Don't think he don't. He don't give a hoot about eternal consequences or lasting shame. Shoot, I hear tell he's even been calling those things pride. Go figure. Anyway, you see what I'm driving at. Don't be looking around at all the other prisoners, citizens, and thinking you're all high and mighty. If you were, you wouldn't be here. So, was he sexually immoral? Well, let me ask you. Let's say it all together. I did not have sex with that intern. Yes, Charles had a problem. He commits adultery, like 20% of men and 13% of women. And his affair with Susan Alexander leads to the very scandal that ruins his political career, back when that stuff mattered. This single act of infidelity is a crucial turning point in our dear brother's downfall, and it reflects his willingness to sacrifice everyone and everything on the altar of his ego. Was there more on that list? Well, let's look. Yes, here it is. I almost forgot. The occult. witchcraft and what have you. Goes by the cute name Wicca now. And what is magic? Well, you might be surprised to find out, actually. Magic, sorcery, divination, and necromancy are all attempts to play God. And while there are no voodoo drum beats in our film noir, there is still magic, for it is Hollywood after all. Beware of those who practice the magic arts. The desire to be God overrides all else. Citizen Kane dabbles in the arts when he waves the wand of currency to build an empire and force his will to manifest in the world. What cannot be done by seances can easily be accomplished with cash. Infertility rites, blood oaths, and the rise of hyper-individualism, we've seen it all, which elevates the self to the level of deity, are all manifestations of witchcraft in our day. Welcome to the coven, citizen. Don't worry, you can check out anytime you like, but you can, well, it's in the fine print. What's left is idolatry and lying, fun. So if you haven't seen the movie, then know this. Citizen Kane does not build an altar to Molech. Nope, his altar is to Mammon and himself. He becomes the idol that he serves. He built his newspaper and his kingdom in his own image. Like the kings of old, he symbolically places his image in every town square so that the lowly citizen will know their Lord and King. When others do not bow, tempers fly. One memorable moment in the film is when Kane loses the election for governor after the scandal with Susan Alexander is exposed. And in his fury, he refuses to concede or show humility at all. Instead, he doubles down, giving a public speech in which he boasts that he will continue fighting regardless of the truth. It's a chilling portrayal of a man who cannot let go of his control, even when it is clear he is in the wrong. And lying, well, none of us fish have ever lied. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know if you've noticed or not, but everyone's first response in the cell is this: I'm not a bad person. They lie, they cheat, they steal, they murder in their hearts, they commit adultery in their minds, and they take the path of least resistance when bravery is called for. But tell them that God has the record. They were caught red-handed. The gig is up. And still, for the first few years, I do believe they protest too much. They haven't quite keyed into the chant that can be heard throughout the simulation. New fish, new fish. Well, new fish, citizen. I hate to point this out, but we are all liars here. We lie about who we are, where we're going, and the fact that we're heading to the same place as Charles Kane if we don't change course. But as Led Zeppelin wisely tells us, yes, there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on. It's time to wake up, dear citizen, and choose a new path before the simulation closes in around you. I realize that your life is, I realize you're special. I get it. I realize that your life is not a film noir. Your life is much more nuanced, isn't it? I know that it is, prisoner number 6. It is much more of a technicolor dream for you, isn't it? You're special, after all. The star of the film is obviously you. You were framed. I know you were. Your ego demands that even the prison movie is about you. Don't worry, it will all work out in the end. I'm sure it will. You have to have a touch of narcissism to end up here anyway, don't you? Maybe you can tunnel your way out of the situation. Maybe you can think your way out of the situation. Like I said, you're very special. Oh, what's that? Oh, you're a lifer here like the rest of us. Oh, well, sorry to hear that. That is a bummer. I have to recalculate some things. Looks like you have a choice then. Jesus and his cross or back to cell block 6. If you want to be the star of the show, then you can be, but I suggest you hitch your wagon to his. Nobody else is going anywhere. Why Jesus, you ask? Well, that's a good question. Well, cellmate, citizen. He is the only one of us to make it out. Not only did he make it out, but he came back to confirm that he had indeed made it out and that he had indeed slaughtered the guards, sin and death. And he sent back live spiritual radio to tell us Don't ask me how he does it. I do not know. This thing called the Holy Spirit, but that's a bit too haughty for me. I call it Victory Radio. It says the same thing every single day. The cross is the exit. But that's the thing, isn't it? Even if the guards have been killed, even if the path to salvation has been won, it is still shadowed over by an instrument of death. You'd have to have a sense of desperation to take that path. He said he was the way. What most people forget is that while he was indeed speaking metaphorically, he most certainly meant that his life, the style with which he lived, the life that he demonstrated, is the way out of this hell. You have a life sentence. You have a life sentence. Actually, it's worse than that. It's much worse than that. The second death is on your doorstep. You need to turn to Christ while there's still time. There's still time to change the road you're on. So I ask you today, brother or sister, are you desperate? Because you should be. Has the simulation failed to live up to all the hype? I know that it has. Do you remember a time when your face went down in the shadows for you to sign a contract and you came up something very different than when you went down? Did you build a temple to yourself that feels as though no one will ever bring that monstrosity down? Do you worship an idol that has grown into your own cruel master? Do you expect something out of yourself that you were not designed to be by your Creator? Do you wish to wrestle control from God in order to rule over your own damnation? Then know this, there is a balm in Gilead. There is an amazing grace. There is life, and then there is life abundant. But it lies in the shadow of a cross. When you die, you will either look back towards some ideal moment that is more of a dream than reality, and all the guilt and shame of life will fall on your shoulders and crush you in that moment, or you will look forward to being free from the simulation and restored to full citizenship in another story. Citizen Abel is there, along with every other person who ever stood for the way, struggled for the way, sacrificed for the way, and knew that the way was important enough to actually die while pointing it out. Before we were known as Christians, we were called people of the way. Charles lost his way. I lost my way. You lost your way. All of us in the simulation have lost our way. But know this, I didn't find the way. The way found me. The Good Shepherd came, told me the error of my ways, and in that moment of humble clarity, I allowed him to bring me back to the fold. I'm no longer illusioned with being my own despot king, sitting on my own throne of dirt. I know how that works out. Wise enough to fear the Lord and fearful enough to be wise. When the fire licks your fingers, don't allow it to go wobbling back to the fire. That's just stupid. The prison is an illusion, one that can easily be escaped by the one who sees the way. I have found the way. It has a name. We have called this way Jesus for over 2,000 of our years. They called us Little Christ to make fun of us, and we wore it proudly. The name stuck, and we became Christians. That name no longer has the sting that it once did. We took the venom out of it. But now, unfortunately, it also means less than it did. Perhaps we need to be called citizens of the way. So I ask you today, brother and sister, Where is your citizenship? Because it matters. Is it in the kingdom of the self, where the fleeting world of illusions and promises control and fracture identity? Or are you ready to claim your true citizenship and find out your true name in the kingdom of God, where life, peace, and freedom await those who will humbly walk the way? Like the figure in that famous film that we have been talking about, whose story speaks of grand ambition and an empire built on personal power, we can fall into the same trap in our own lives. The empire might look impressive from the outside, but it is little more than a gilded prison. The world teaches us to build our castles in the sand, yet we remain blind to the cracks that run deep through the foundations of everything we build. And here's the irony: just like the character in the movie, there comes a moment when all the wealth, all the power, and all the success, and all the world don't fill the void that gnaws at the human soul day and night. That character's last whisper reveals something far deeper than ambition could ever satisfy. No spoilers, I promise, but let's just say it leaves a powerful lesson about what we often lose in pursuit of the world around us. The truth that sets us free is standing right in front of us, waiting for us to surrender every moment. Not to our ambitions or desires, but to a greater purpose and a better story. Why anybody turns it down, I do not know. We too can break free from the illusions we've been trapped in if we turn our eyes away from the fleeting and fix them instead on the eternal. This world has led many to wonder not just who they are, but this world has led people to ask what they are. God help us. There are people today who identify as animals. You're a child of God. If you're listening, you're a child of God. Get up off all fours. I suggest to you that a way back to sanity would be to identify first and foremost as a child of God and as a citizen of His kingdom. The objective reality of God has now been cast aside by the enchantments of modern culture. The simulation we live in tells us that the self is king and that our image, our power, and our identity can save us. But these are all prisons in disguise. And while it may feel overwhelming, there is hope. There is a simple path forward. We call it the Christ mind. This mindset calls us out of the illusion and into the freedom that only comes through the blood of Christ. The world has lied to you. Go figure. Just as it lied to Cain, just as it lied to Abel, just as it lied to Adam and Eve, just as it lied to number 6. It offers you power, it offers you wealth, it offers you comfort, it offers you everything you ever wanted, everything that you think will set you free. But in truth, it locks you in a cage of your own making. Like Charles Foster Kane, you can amass an entire empire, you can build monuments to your own success, but at the end of it all, you may find yourself alone, clutching at shadows, desperately searching for the one thing that slipped through your fingers so many years ago, your soul. And like Andy Dufresne in Shawshank Redemption, you may be living in a prison not made of bars, but of pride, fear, and ambition. The question is this: will you continue to sit in that cell, content to let the world's lies define you, or will you be like Andy, crawling through the darkest, nastiest places on earth to emerge free on the other side? But perhaps the most subtle trap is the one from The Prisoner, an old BBC show, where you are led to believe that the walls aren't really there, that you're free, when in reality, every step you take is watched, every decision you make is controlled. The Village tells you that freedom is an illusion, but you know better. You know there is a way out, a way that does lead to true freedom. The choice is before you now. It is an important choice. Will you build your empire like Citizen Kane, only to watch it fall? Will you stay trapped like a prisoner, even when the door is wide open? Or will you tear it all completely down, your pride, your ego, your false securities, and walk into the freedom that Jesus Christ offers you through the instrument of death? The choice is simple, and yet it is profound. Will you continue to build your own fragile empire, or will you tear it down and trade it for citizenship in God's kingdom? I met him once. The man from the cross and the grave. He's kinder than you can ever imagine. Oh man, he's tough as nails too. I want to be like him when I grow up. As for right now, he told me to tell you. So I'm telling you, prisoner number 6. There's a name written on a white stone just the other side of that cross. If you think you have what it takes to grab it, we just might find out what your name is today. My name? Don't worry about that. Only he knows it. His name we all know. Christ is King. Hail to the King.